One of the universal truths about working in organizations is that people will inevitably clash. Whether it's a conflict that you have started accidentally or if it's a conflict that someone else has started, we're going to talk about how do you resolve those issues, those interpersonal conflicts that you have that you are an active participant in. And we're going to talk about how can you do that in a way that doesn't burn bridges and allows you to move forward and work with your coworkers in a professional way. There's all different reasons for why people might burn bridges, either intentionally or unintentionally. What are the typical kind of reasons that people burn bridges? The first reason is gossiping or talking negatively about colleagues behind their backs. The second is spreading rumors or false information. The third is threatening coworkers with ultimatums or unrealistic demands. And number four is making assumptions about other people's actions or intentions. Now, notice that these specific examples are not something that's necessarily tied to the work. So it's not saying, oh, so-and-so missed a deadline, so-and-so didn't, whatever. It doesn't have to do with their specific performance. It's usually interpersonal, people-to-people conflicts, human conflict, if you will, about people's emotions getting tied into a business setting. Okay, now that we've talked about what causes them, let's talk about how do you resolve them. The first thing that you want to do is listen for the real pain point. Every conflict has one underlying thing that causes it to be a powder keg. If you've noticed that a coworker might gossip about you and no conflict starts, there's usually a match that goes off and creates a boom, but what is that real pain point? But usually the pain points that are related to a conflict are things like insecurity, bad timing, or an assumption about your intent. So let's say, as an example, you have a conflict at work and you said something accidentally and someone assumes that you are out to get their job. They're going to be really defensive and scared and feel like you're coming after them. So if you can identify what is the real pain point in that example that I just said, it's an insecurity or it's a fear-based response. Sometimes there's people who want to be aggressive. Sometimes you catch people off, again, with bad timing. If somebody just broke up with their significant other, or they just got into a car crash, or whatever. Sometimes people are in an emotional heightened state. Sometimes that timing is enough to cause a powder keg. But you want to understand what is the reason, what is the pain point beyond just the conflict that you've kind of been engaged with. The second thing that you want to do is keep your emotions in check. Usually conflicts kind of escalate because people ping pong back and forth. So if you think about it as an analogy, one person starts here, they say something nasty, another person says something nasty, this person says something nasty, and eventually you're all the way up here at a really heightened kind of attitude and you're at each other's throats because you've had so much back and forth. And whether you want to admit it or not, maybe you haven't been actively punching back, but there's a lot of reasons that a conflict escalates. And if you are part of this situation, if you're in this bubble, you have to acknowledge that it does take two to tango. And the thing that you are able to do to control the situation is remain professional and bring your attitude and your emotions back down to zero. Approach the situation with as much empathy and responsibility as you can. Tip number 3 is to actively look for win-win situations. Now, depending on where you are in your conflict resolution journey, you might be really far away from a win-win opportunity, but you can take those win-wins in incremental steps. Whatever that first win-win looks like, you need to start figuring out ways of building trust. Even if you don't like this person, if you need to work with them or if you want to resolve those conflicts, you need to figure out how to start building trust. And depending on where you are in that resolution journey, you might have to be the first one to step up and actually say, hey, can we sit down and figure out what a win-win looks like for both of us? In the first month, your win-win might just be, I don't want to talk to you until we both have cooled down. Or your win-win might be, let's have a meeting with both of us and our supervisors to figure out where things went off the cliff. Or a win-win might be, let's just go sit down and get coffee and talk about what happened. Those type of things are win-win, even if the conflict has not been fully resolved at that point. The fourth thing that you want to make sure, the fourth tip that I have for you in this category is not to betray yourself. One of the things that a lot of people assume if you are in a conflict, if you're in some sort of back and forth with someone, a lot of times it feels like you have to give up part of yourself in order to apologize. I'm not saying that you have to approach it with a whole big ego and say, I'm in the right, you're in the wrong. But one of the things that you want to make sure is that you are approaching the situation from your genuine, authentic self and not betraying yourself. So, not saying, I'm sorry if you're not sorry. If you're not sorry for what happened, don't apologize. But you want to make sure that you can approach the situation with authenticity and making sure that when the interaction is done, that you don't feel like you've betrayed yourself. Because a lot of times when conflicts are resolved, if you feel like, let's say the conflict has resolved, you've gone through the win-win process over and over, and you've gotten to a point where you feel like the conflict has been resolved. If you don't feel like you authentically handled the situation, if you feel like you've betrayed yourself in that negotiation or in that conflict resolution, you will not feel like you're walking away with a sense of relief. And that's the whole point of conflict resolution, is to walk away with a sense of, okay, I feel calm in how I've done this, and we are all able to move forward. And if you've betrayed yourself in that process, you're more likely to retreat back into anger, back into jealousy, back into whatever emotion that you were in before, and it's not going to resolve the conflict in the long run. Let me know in the comments below, how do you handle conflict? What is one big tip that you have for people watching this on how to resolve conflict? And if you're interested in watching more videos, I have another video about how to deal with sneaky coworkers if you're interested in checking that out. And with that, I will see you in the next one.